all right. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? We've got a full panel this morning. We've got Mash, we've got Leigh-Ann, we got me, and we got you. That's all we need. Don't you just love waking up and it's rained or it's raining? I spoke about this the other day. It's still my favorite thing. It's the best way to wake up.
I do love it on a weekend.
Oh, the best. So what's happening, you two? What's been going on?
A lot has been going on, Gareth.
Oh
no. We got a dramatic Mash story for a Monday. Who would have guessed, huh?
Well, today all I need is advice more than anything from you guys and from the audience. Because load shedding is back and it's in full force. And in my area, I've been having quite a bit of electricity problems over the last week. So I was getting like 6 hours of load shedding, not even load shedding, just power cuts.
What? No. I thought we were actually better now than we were like 2 weeks ago.
Everyone else is better. It's just my area, unfortunately. Yeah. So my area is really suffering at the moment. And just power cuts all the time, unexpectedly. I mean, yesterday I was trying to bake and then they came out again. So I wanted to scream because I had just put the cookies in the damn oven. So that's the life I've been living. So yesterday I didn't have electricity until quite late, quite late. And then one of my neighbors actually came by to... Gareth is already laughing.
Is this the nightgown neighbor or is it a different one?
No, this is a completely different neighbor. My neighbor came by to actually ask to borrow a candle. So I just wanted to start the day and get your advice. Do you guys think a person would actually ask for a candle? I mean, we live in a generation of cell phones. You have cell phones. You can use your flashlight. People have Magentos, those little lamp thingies that you get at Macro. We have so many different alternatives to a candle. So having someone actually come over to my house and ask to borrow a candle for me is very unusual. So I need to get you guys' feedback.
I don't think they wanted a candle.
They wanted light in their life, but maybe in a different way.
Yeah. Yes. Right. I think they were actually asking you. They were like, they couldn't handle, they weren't sure how to deal with it, but they wanted you. So like, what I can ask. I know I'll ask him for a candle, but they really wanted, there was an excuse to see you. Don't you agree?
Yeah. A cup of sugar wouldn't have gone down because no one could bake. And what would you need a whole cup of sugar for?
And also, I mean, one candle. So I figured it out quite quickly, and I actually regretted going like, I don't have buy. Afterwards, I had afterthoughts, and I thought to myself, I should have just let them in. I should have just been like, yeah, come in, come have a cup of water, because you can't make tea. There's no electricity. Come have a cup of water, come have a cool drink, a glass of wine or something. So I've been thinking about that. It's been running over and over in my head the whole evening. And I thought to myself, damn it, this could have been my future, I just blew it away, but it's fine.
But also, what sort of world do you live in and complex do you live in, Mash, where all these romantic liaisons have opportunity both ways? Like, what's going on?
It's like a soap opera sort of complex. It seems to me to be a place where there's always something going on that isn't what looks like is going on. There's some underlying story. There's some golden thread. Like,
and no one really knows. Like on either side.
There's a director who's in the background going, okay, now we're going to send this character. And it's almost like, what was the Truman Show? And Mash is Truman. Because we get to hear his stories every Monday. Now they have to keep upping the ante. They have to keep making it exciting. So they send the new neighbor around. Hi, Mash, could I have a candle? Da-da, bow, bow, or whatever.
Oh, you gonna get a candle.
But you didn't take the bait, though.
I didn't take the bait, unfortunately. But that's what's been happening in my life this weekend. Nothing exciting yet. So let's wait and see. What's been happening with you, Leigh-Ann?
Certainly
what
not
happened?
anyone knocking on my door. But yeah,
What
just
do you mean?
yeah.
Are they not hanging around for like neighbor sex, like at Mash's complex?
No, I mean the most
Hello.
exciting thing that happened in my
Morning.
driveway
I
was
brought you coffee.
no, the
No?
most exciting thing that happened in my driveway over the weekend was I scared the Mr. Delivery guy, but quite badly.
Hey, boo.
I think he thought
How?
he was being hijacked. So just before he arrived, I'm obviously tracking his path, his journey on my phone. And just before he arrived, I thought, well, I must move my car because it was in the sun. So I thought, let me move it into the shade. And then I thought, well, I might as well just sit in the car while I'm waiting for him to arrive. He's just around the corner. And so he came in and didn't expect that I would come out from behind him. And I think he almost pooped his little scooter pants when I came from behind.
Yeah.
So that was quite fun. He almost dropped the tray of what are they called, smoothies. But yeah, no, nothing like that happening. I did get to see some family, which was great.
Okay.
And yeah, I promised myself that I would work, and that promise, sat with me from Friday all the way to last night, and nothing came of fruition from that.
Well,
Hey, boo.
the weekends are pretty much full. I've got something happening every weekend now until the end of the year, and it's not that many, so I don't want to piss you off, especially if you're enjoying yourself right now and you're thinking, "Oh, this is the best time of the year," and I'm excited about it, like I am, right? But essentially, okay, so we've already had the first weekend of November, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we are well into December, right? In fact, we've got 3 weekends left of this month, and then it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then it's Christmas. So, hate to spoil it for you, but that's how it's going to go. It's going to be over before it's even begun. So, just enjoy every single second of it. And if you've got things happening already, if your diary is full of stuff, I mean that's good, right? That means you got things to look forward to. You're going to be keeping really busy. It's good stuff.
I got invited out this weekend, but I didn't go on Saturday on Friday night rather. And the
Yeah.
reason why I didn't go is because my friend who invited me out, they were already out and about at the club, and they invited me out at 11:30. Now, I didn't quite appreciate this, and I actually ended up arguing with this friend of mine because I thought to myself, I'm an afterthought. You guys made plans, you made this big hoorah, and then at 11:30 you're like, oh, let's invite Mash. So I kind of felt like I'm your afterthought.
Yeah.
It's either I'm in your damn plans or I'm not. Why are you inviting me out at 11:30?
How
So I didn't
rude.
go out.
Yeah, also because they'll probably be well oiled and on their way, and all the formalities are out of the way, and they're all on board with each other's stories, and then you pitch up and it's like, hey, what's happening? But
Exactly.
like crickets.
Well, you can also tell, like when people have dinners or house parties or whatever, and they invite you like on the day, but in the afternoon, and you're like, I think this is because they needed to fill a gap. I'm the person they've called because they, someone else let them down. It's never a good feeling.
It's never a good
Never good.
feeling. And also joining other people's plans is never really fun. It's never
No.
really fun. And if anything were to happen, it'll happen to you. That's what usually happens. The person who was never in the plan, if anything were to happen, phone gets stolen, whatever, wild night out, it'll always happen to the person who was never part of the plan. So no, thank you.
Well, yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff that we need to talk about. It's also election week in the US this week. So we've got they will finally be getting on with the business of an election, which I don't think election season ever ends now. It's just all year round, 24/7. So there's going to be a lot of noise coming out of America this week, and there are probably a few people who are celebrating, end of year functions. That kind of thing is happening again. So if you've got any of that going on, let us know. Also, you could drop us a WhatsApp on 071 783 6214. That's 071 783 6214. There is no need to be this person. Hang on a second.
Yeah, just let us enjoy. There definitely seems to be more activity in the neighborhoods and more like neighbors having parties. And there was quite a wild party in the area this weekend. So I think, people are really back into the swing of things, out and about, and no longer being hermits in their homes.
You mentioned the swing of things, so I've got to ask you something, because you used to date a swinger, and you were a swinger for a while. So I heard there are two things that this came up in a conversation I had on Friday. Apparently there are two ways you can tell if someone is a swinger, or there are three. You can ask them straight up, like, hey, are you a swinger? And then they'll go, yes, how did you know? Or they'll go, excuse me, it's none of your business, or whatever. So that's obviously, that makes sense. But then there are two ways you can tell. Is it true, Leigh-Ann? And you've been out of that whole world for a long time, so maybe you're not the right person to ask. Maybe you still know some people who are. Is it true that swingers in these big estates, that they leave their garage door open if they are into swinging?
Like,
because
just a little bit, or what, overnight?
I don't know.
Like an actual garage door.
Like, maybe if there's a swingers party going on, maybe they might do something like that.
There's that. And then the other way that they said is that apparently real professional swingers who are doing this all the time, they have those Carol Boys door handles.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently that is also a dead giveaway that the people who live in that house. Now, I mean, we might have listeners who right now have got Carol Boys handles on their doors, and they didn't realize. Yeah, they didn't realize this is a swingers thing. But those are the two things I heard for sure. And the reason I'm asking is because for the whole of last week, I've had some builders here. They've been building fixing these steps that I've got in front of my house. And it's taken, like 5 days. But because the builder needs to put things like the cement in the garage, otherwise it's going to get wet, I've had the garage door open pretty much all day for 5 days. I haven't had any interest, which is a little bit disappointing. But I suddenly thought, oh, wow, okay, I hope people don't think I'm a swinger. So is this true? What do you know about this? Help us.
So firstly, I've never heard the Carol Boys door handle thing before. What I do know is, and I was about to say, is it perhaps in the shape of a pineapple? Because, of course, pineapples are the symbol for swingers.
Really?
So yes. So you'll often find a pineapple sticker on a door or on a window, just like you would a gay flag or a trans flag. It's, something showing your sexual interest. The pineapple is the symbol. So often on cruise ships in particular, you'll find quite blatantly pineapples stuck to people's cabin doors, indicating that they're open and interested. The garage door thing I've also never heard of, but I think that might be because of security issues in South Africa. We just don't leave our garage door open. And also because of that, the parties are very private and well organized. So you need to be part of the community to be invited. If you're bringing somebody new, they would need to submit an HIV test.
Wow.
And also,
it's a lot more complicated. Right.
Yeah. Also, as a single man, you wouldn't be allowed to go to this party anyway.
Right. Okay, I got you.
Wow. Is this the door handle?
Oh, wait, we just got a blank screen.
See, we couldn't see. See. What the hell?
Those look like
those.
They are door handles. It
I
looks
think
like
that's
someone in a
point,
yoga
Gareth.
position.
I think that's the point.
Oh, wow.
I think they're supposed to look like penises.
Maybe those are them. That might be it. Who knows?
Poor old Carol Boys in her grave.
She's just trying to sell door handles, and this is what's going on. All right. Clearly, it's bullshit. You hear a lot of urban legends about this stuff. and they said that the biggest estates for this to happen in are Midstream and Silver Lakes in Pretoria.
Yeah, definitely Pretoria.
Silver Lakes, yes.
And often, swingers will first go out somewhere to a bar or a club. And because it's so community driven, you said maybe one of the things is, could you just ask the person? Generally, if you're with these people, you'll be known. Everyone in the bar will know that the swingers are there that night.
Oh, wow.
It's just, and then they might strike up a conversation with you, like I've had before.
Right. Can't you also tell from all the fortuners outside? When there's like a whole bunch of fortuners parked outside?
Is that the swinger car?
I'm assuming it is. I've heard stories about that like everybody puts their fortunate keys in a bowl, and then whoever key you grab out of the bowl is who you're sleeping with that evening.
Yes.
Or that round. Yes, it's the fortunate. It's the swingers car. Oh, sorry, Toyota.
I think we're defaming a bunch of really like nice people who happen to be driving Fortuners.
Yeah.
With Carol Boy's handles.
No, not on the Fortuner. Otherwise, you're just screaming out desperately.
So if you came onto this show this morning and you thought you'd just hear some like friendly nonsense, Mash and Leigh-Ann and I just laughing, talking shit. Well, no, we've just basically defamed a whole swathe of people in this country who just thought that they'd buy a nice pair of door handles and drive a Fortuner, and we've just made them seem like they're really twisted. But who knew? So, all right, here's something from Tracy. She says, according to Sex in Afrikaans, which was that show that was on not so long ago, in Pretoria, swingers parties are called a braai and a naai, or a bring and naai. Oh my God. Woody says, I'll never eat Hawaiian pizza again, which is hilarious. I'm screwed as I don't have a front door, says Freddie. Oh, well, counts you out. Sorry about that, Freddie. Too bad. Rebellious Ruth says, I love that I just walked in on this. That's what happens on this show. There was a certain upmarket bar in Benoni that was apparently owned by swingers. Wow. And then Vyasin wants to know, is there a chance of one losing their partner while being in the swinger community? See, you have to go in. You can't. You just said it, Leigh-Ann. Like I couldn't join because I'm a single guy. You have to bring a partner.
I doubt you'd lose your partner because you're both in the same mindset when you go there, aren't you?
Yeah, you definitely have to be in the same mindset. Usually you've met your partner in that setting anyway.
Yes.
So you need to be mature about it and understand that the same can happen. He could meet somebody else.
Just Brian Nye, man.
I don't see how it works long term, but we won't get into that discussion. There's so much other stuff to talk about. All right, so let's move on. We do have a few things on the agenda. Apparently, Elon Musk has been having a very busy time on Twitter. He just banned Kathy Griffin because she was impersonating him. So obviously everybody went, oh, well, that's not a free speech. All the people who hate Elon Musk are like, oh, well, how can you be pro-free speech if you ban someone? So apparently Kathy Griffin turned her name into Elon Musk, and the account was suspended. So eventually someone said, what are you doing? And Elon said, no, actually, she was suspended for impersonating a comedian. But if she wants her account back, she can have it for $8, which is excellent. So she's going to have to pay, which is great because Kathy Griffin, I think she probably she should be able to afford it, although she hasn't done any successful gigs or been paid any money for at least 5 years in comedy. She's not that funny anymore. You remember she's become intensely political. But who knows? I mean, this is the kind of shit that he can do this. It's his company, right?
Yes.
Well, exactly. And she's not the only one. There were quite a few celebrities who, in kind of protest, changed their name to Elon Musk.
Oh, really?
So if he's going to ban people, he's going to need more staff to monitor, and he doesn't have more staff because he's laid off half of them. It's a big trend at the moment for Twitter employees to wake up in the morning and film themselves opening their laptops to see whether they still have their jobs or not.
Yo, and poor Kathy. Poor Kathy Griffin. This woman was cancelled for quite a long time. In fact, she wasn't cancelled. She described it as she was erased. And for some time, you never saw her anyway. Nobody wanted to book her. There was no shows. She was just off the face of the earth. And I can't remember why, but I think it was something she tweeted a couple of years back.
She's terrible. She didn't she tweet a picture of like she had this thing where she had cut off Donald Trump's head or something. I think it was that.
Was it. Yes.
And you're like, well, okay, sure, that's that's funny, but it's just a bit crappy. And she is a bit crappy. She's one of those people who, I don't know. I mean, I've seen her on a roast where she was quite funny. I can't remember which one it was. It was Joan Rivers. And she was okay on that. But other than that, I don't think she's been funny for a long time. So let's see. Again, if you remember what people used to say when someone on the right was banned from Twitter, what did people on the left say? They came up and they said, oh, well, why don't you just start your own? So they did. And they called it Parler or something like that. And then that was shut down because no one would host their servers. So all I'm going to say to all these people who are unhappy about whatever Elon does with the company that he has bought, that he owns, is start your own. Just start your own. That's what you said to people on the right. You were like, well, why don't you just start your own instead of complaining? So that's what I'm going to say to them. So go, Kathy Griffin. Let's see if you can start your own and if anyone will follow you. I mean, look at her. Doesn't she look like, and I don't want to be extra mean here, but she does look like a guy in drag impersonating a woman. Don't you think?
Yeah, look, her looks have always been a bit of a discussion in the media, and as the media does, and I recently saw there's some pretty nasty photos of her without her makeup. But you know what's new? The media is always doing that
all the time.
Yeah, and frankly, you know, who do you know that looks exactly the same without makeup and with makeup? I mean, this is to be honest, this is something that guys just we have to gamble. You throw the dice and you never know. You meet someone and you know this girl's got makeup on and she looks magnificent, and then who knows? You end up going home together. You wake up the next morning and she doesn't look anything like she looked the night before. I think it's misrepresentation, frankly.
Well,
it is.
I think it's good makeup artistry skills for her.
That's pretty true. Tabo says Parler is still there. Yes, of course. But it is nowhere near the size of something like Twitter. So, I mean, this is again why instead of starting a new one, you just buy what there already is. And if you consider how much the whole media business, everyone in media needs Twitter, because they do. I mean, especially news organizations, they use Twitter as their main distribution platform. So why build a new one when you can just buy the one that everyone uses?
And also building something of the magnitude of Twitter is going to cost a lot, because I did use Parler. I got Parler 2 weeks back. Someone in the office actually made me get it. Ryan made me get it. I got this app and wow, hey, it is absolutely terrible. It feels like you're using a little website in a little app, and it's just terrible. Everything just highlights, even the menu highlights. Sometimes you can't tap certain things. It's terrible. So yeah. No Parler for me.
I think we discussed this with Simpiwe one morning, but now you've got a similar problem, and we like to solve problems here. You love advice. Mash, you love asking the audience for advice, and sometimes they give you really good advice, and sometimes it's terrible, but we'll take our chances today. So you wanted to know, how do you deal with someone who's owed you money for a long time and has no desire to pay you back? And just on that note, I saw, this is quite interesting, a story that's just come up, that apparently there's a bar somewhere.
Yes. I was actually going to get to that as well.
Oh, it's Saint. Saint Champagne Bar and Lounge. They have just started naming and shaming people who haven't paid their bills. So this is what they said on their Instagram. We've reached out to you numerous times, and they've got the guy's like handle, and they've put a photo of him up, right? In the form of phone calls, emails, texts, and messages. We've never received a response. Please pay what you owe Saint Lounge with immediate effect. We have expenses and responsibilities, and your failure to make payment has affected our business and many families. We have a duty to pay suppliers, staff, talent, artists. agents, attorneys, the City of Cape Town, government and contractors, and there are too many expenses and responsibilities. South Africa and Africa as a whole, please assist us in reaching out to this person. Failure to pay will result in extreme measures. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. To you and other customers who still owe us money, you have 30 minutes to now clear your bill. We will continue to post every week until you've cleared your bill. How's that?
Oh my gosh.
And there are
So,
I love
already
this.
3,800 comments and building. And this person, I hope they've replied, but it's a musician.
Musician?
It's a musician that owes this money. And you can only imagine what that bill must be for them to have gone to this trouble. We're not talking about like a couple of $100, right?
No, about 10,000 Rand.
Shit. Okay, well, I think this is great. This is what social media is for. If you don't pay your bills and you are not responding to emails or phone calls or WhatsApps or whatever, this is a way to get you to pay, right?
Yes, it is. This whole trend actually started with Mihlalen Damase, who is a beauty YouTuber. She's very popular, and she actually called out brands that owe her money. There's quite a number of brands that she's actually done work for, but then haven't paid her in months. So she went on Instagram and she called them out one by one. And it was gin brands, alcohol brands, makeup brands. It was about 3 brands or 4 brands in total. And one by one, she came for them. And that's where Saint got this. They saw that within a day, Michelle was paid. And they were like, listen, we're going to be doing this as well. So on, I think it was Saturday or Friday evening, when Saint issued their first warning that, listen, Sunday, 7 p.m., we're going to be announcing, rather exposing everyone who hasn't paid their bills. And then they came on Saturday and said, majority of the people have actually paid their bills. There's still a couple of people who haven't. Well, not rather have paid their bills, but have paid or made arrangements to pay their bills. And the people who haven't are the ones we'll be exposing the following day. So
this is the guy who hasn't paid his bills. This dude.
Just look.
Have a look. Okay, let me just try and in there. This guy.
That's that's not his car. Yeah.
All right, so that's the guy who hasn't paid his bills.
You know, the city of Joburg does something similar. And I know because it's happened to me multiple times. But they type up a letter on an A4 piece of paper stating exactly what you owe.
Yes.
And saying this is a pre-termination notice. And they put it nicely into a plastic sleeve so that it's protected and stick it to your gate so that people walking past can see how much you owe. And yeah, that works too. You feel a little bit silly that's happened and that all your neighbors know who you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, that's way more embarrassing than, any kind of bill that's unpaid or anything like that. Because your actual neighbors can see it and they're like, oh, that person doesn't pay their bills. They're a delinquent player. It's very good.
Like, it reminds me of my previous complex I used to live in where, so first of all, you guys know this by now, the walls were basically cardboard and the electricity meters were really loud. So as soon as your electricity went below a certain amount of kilowatts, it'll start beeping and beeping like crazy, nonstop. And even if you could stop the sound, but it'll stop for like an hour and it'll start beeping again. So it was always so humiliating because you'd walk past someone's apartment and you'd be like, oh, chill. These people can't even pay the electricity. It was always the most humiliating thing, just walking down the corridors. Even my neighbors sometimes out here that beep, beep, beep all day long. And I'll be like, yo, this person. And
that sound is. I was actually unaware of this. So now you've taught me something.
People aren't paying the electricity. But I wanted to find out how to deal with people who are not paying you in a personal capacity. Yes, Michele dealt with brands like that. Saint is dealing with people like this. Well, they're musicians, if we can call them that. I want to find out, how can we personally deal with people? Or should you just post them as well?
Well, first of all, when they come to ask you for a candle, give them a candle. I don't know. I think that this naming and shaming thing may be the way to take things, because some people are just shameless. They don't mind racking up bills. They don't mind, if it's not their money and they've put you in a position where you suddenly uh, are down because you don't have any money, but they've borrowed it and they're okay. I mean, there's some people who just have no shame. They'll be like, "Yeah, you
Hmm.
remember that 500 rand that I borrowed from you? Well, you're not going to get that back." I mean, there are people who
Hmm.
will actually do that, who behave exactly like that. I just think it's appalling.
Hmm.
I don't know
Oh,
how,
yeah.
because I can't go to sleep at night if I know I owe people money.
I can't I really can't. And you get those people who, after they borrow money from you and you want it back, you have to
Right.
kind of borrow it back from them and actually ask for it. And sometimes they give you attitude. They're like, it's just 500 Rand. And it's like, it wasn't just 500 Rand when you asked for it.
Well, exactly. And I do think that there's some people who just have hide like rhinos. You can't, they don't seem to get, they're not insulted or offended by the fact that this is how they behave. They just
Mm,
spend money, they borrow from other people. They don't seem to give a shit. So I don't know how
Mm.
that works. I really don't know how that works. But
mm.
if you have any suggestions, Leigh-Ann, we're all ears.
No, I'm usually the borrower, so
Right.
and no, I don't sleep at night because of it.
Mm,
But yeah, I think understand as well that somebody who doesn't pay you back is not always because they're just thick-skinned,
mm.
or don't give a shit. It's sometimes because they really can't, and it is
Well,
bothering them. So yeah, keep that in mind.
okay, but I mean, I do think that that's the minority. I don't.
That is.
So some of these people clearly don't give a shit. They really don't. And
They
I've
really
I've
don't
seen
care.
I've seen this. I mean, like one of my friends says that this girl he knows owes him, I don't know, lots of money. Let's call it thousands of rands. And she's a
Mm.
friend. She's not a girlfriend or anything. And she's borrowed because she was in need and he felt sorry for her. And now she's just not even, you know, she's not even picking up the phone when he.
Bringing it up.
You see,
Mm.
that's what
Oh,
happens. So, my mother actually started a mashonisa business, and hi, ma'am. She started a mashonisa business a couple of years ago. And she started borrowing people money, and my dad advised against it. I also advised against it because I told her this won't end well. This
yeah.
won't end well. Years later, she lost half her friends because her friends just borrowed money and never paid it back. They were referring people who borrowed money and never paid it back. And it turned into a whole dilemma. And my mom actually would call me and be like, please call this person and pretend to be a lawyer and tell them that, yeah, you're going to actually, or I'm going to take legal action against them. Just put on your best English accent and yeah, just do it for me quickly. And there I was. I'd spend like 2 hours of my week every week just calling people pretending to be a lawyer for my mom. So that was something that I experienced firsthand. And after that, I thought to myself, yo, I will never allow myself to be in this position, in a position where I have to call people and pretend to be a lawyer to get my money back. And
Well,
that's one thing I learned. If you're going to borrow someone money, number one, make sure it's someone that you can talk to without feeling intimidated and someone who you can just straight up say to them, hey, you donor,
listen,
bring my money back.
like the Mashonisa business is big in South Africa. Eh? There are lots of
Mm,
people who are professional, in inverted commas, professional money lenders, but they charge outrageous rates, and it's just if people get into those debts, they just never get out of them. They'll charge like 40-50% interest a month,
Yeah.
which is just
mm,
crazy. Um, I do want to bring this up because this is related to everything we've discussed so far this morning, and in some ways, it's the same kind of thing. This is a story about Elon Musk and Twitter, but this is not what you expect. He threatened that he's going to name and shame companies who've paused advertising on Twitter. So prior to the statement, he blamed pressure from activist groups for the pause in ad spending. He said investors at Twitter would not become a free for all hellscape in a letter. So he's apparently said he's going to name all the companies that have decided to pause advertising with Twitter since he's taken over. And he's going to diss them basically wherever he can, which is pretty interesting. I think it would
Mm.
be a really, really cool thing to do. So apparently, someone called Mike Davis said to him, you have 114 million Twitter followers. name and shame the advertisers who are succumbing to the advertiser boycotts so that we can counter boycott them and get your $8 monthly subscription growing ASAP so that we can start to make up for lost revenue now. And Elon Musk said, thank you. A thermonuclear name and shame is exactly what will happen if this continues. So we will see.
I feel like that's a bit harsh. I mean, you guys know that I'm in the social media business for brands and handle their advertising on certain platforms and ad spend. And there are some companies which have stopped. For instance, VW South Africa has come out and said, we are pausing ads until the Twitter market stabilizes. You know, I think it's absolutely your personal right as a brand or a person to stop or withhold advertising for now. I certainly would.
So these companies are all a bunch of, first of all, the marketing people in these companies are the absolute lowlives and scum, most of them. Second of all, they are terrified of bad publicity, right? So they want all the good publicity when there's something good going on, but they want none of the bad. And they hide in the shadows. These are big companies who ought to be courageous enough to have the courage of their convictions. Now, you will never win in marketing unless you take a few risks. And these people expect to take no risks and reap all the rewards. So no, I think good goes with the bad. If we're going to name and shame people when there's a boycott, then when there's a counter boycott, we can name and shame them too. So I'm all for what was called by this Mike Davis, this idea of naming and shaming. Go for it. Let's hear who they are. I want to know who these companies are, because a lot of them are hiding behind, massive corporate budgets. They don't spend them. That causes a log jam. It's harder than ever to get advertising money out of people these days. I want to know who the ones who are who have the courage to stand for something instead of just stand against something. I want to know who those people are. So I'm all for it. That's a big
what is worrying me most about this whole name and shaming culture we're actually stepping into at the moment is the fact that at some point, because it seems like everybody's starting to do it. Brands are starting to name and shame. Influencers are starting to name and shame. Everybody's naming and shaming at the moment. And if we all name and shame, including Twitter, naming and shaming, at some point, it's not going to mean anything. Nobody's going to be afraid of naming and shaming, because if everybody's naming and shaming, then what reason do you have to be scared? Because everybody's being named and shamed.
Right.
So at some point, it's not going to work anymore. It's not going to work anymore. Well, and that's what's worrying me.
Look, all of this stuff is going to work a whole lot less because eventually everyone's going to be doing it, right? Here's a terrible story. Yonda says, a friend of mine is owed by a big pharmaceutical vaccine manufacturing company 150,000 Rand they're owed. And when he asked to be paid, they say they'll only pay him 10K.
Hey, boo.
You see, this is also where these big companies will pressure the little companies out of business, because you don't have the kind of cash flow that a big, massive multinational corporation has. So if you're a small business and you're owed 150 grand, that's a big dent in your bottom line. It's a big part of your cash flow. How are you going to survive? If this is the kind of thing that you do, it's really that's tough. I don't like hearing stories like that, but they are happening everywhere. All right. One quick thing before we get to Dr. Hanan. There's another story in the news that I thought would interest you. So Meghan Markle has changed her mind about royal titles. Surprise, surprise. She had a conversation with Princess Eugenie and Beatrice. And she said Meghan had previously disregarded the importance of titles. But however, after seeing how useful the titles have been for Eugenie and Beatrice, who, both of them are friends with Meghan, she's now determined to cling to her titles. So that's from one of the news sources close to the palace. There's insiders. But I don't know what I don't know what I believe here. I know that this woman is just a relentless self-marketer, self-serving. Whatever she needs to do to get and keep the attention, she will. And as for Eugenie and Beatrice, the daughters of Prince Andrew, I'm not surprised that they explain the importance of their titles. What else do those two have? What else have they got going for them?
Yeah.
They need those titles very badly, because otherwise they'll have nothing. So if they weren't princesses, you wouldn't give them a second look, right? Am I being
Yeah.
unfair?
No, it's true.
No.
All right. Anyway, there's the little bit of news that we wanted to get in before we get to Dr. Hanan, but it is Monday morning, which means it is going to be okay. Is it going to be okay, Dr. Hanan? You've got to tell us.
It's always going to be okay. Absolutely.
All right. So first things first, Dr. Hanan is here to talk about something that we've really got to pay some attention to. Why? Because it's that time of year. Matric exams are on the horizon and actually underway for some people too. Now, along with that comes a lot of stress and anxiety for both the learners who are writing the exams and for their parents. So today we're going to speak to Dr. Hanan about what we can do to help our kids who are feeling a little bit stressed about the exams. And it's not just the matrics who are writing. A lot of other kids are stressed too. And we're joined by Tyron Fuchslach, who is a teacher. He's been a teacher for 22 years, worked with children from 6 to 20 years old. He started his own school back in 2014, which is pretty amazing. And now he has 5 campuses in Gauteng and in the Western Cape. And the schools try to help children who suffer from high anxiety and a host of other learning challenges. So, Tyron, nice to have you on the show. How are you?
Yeah, morning, Gareth. Very good, and yourself?
Good. Nice to see you. First of all,
Yes.
Just tell us about your schools before we carry on.
Thanks, Gareth. So basically our schools cater for, those kind of children who do suffer from high anxiety, ADD, ADHD. I think, if you go back 10, 15 years, a lot of these children kind of flew under the radar. No one really looked out for them. They didn't have a place to go. So we sort of put schools up where they had a place to go, where they were getting more support, where their anxieties were managed. Whereas in, bigger classrooms, no one was really kind of identifying these children. So our schools will, put them in an environment where they can learn without being persecuted, without feeling like they, not normal, because a lot of schools were making them feel that way. Some of them have dyslexia, dyscalculia, which means they can't read or they can't actually do maths. And bigger schools weren't picking that up. So we've given them a place where we can help them through those difficulties. And that was causing, obviously, it's huge anxiety. If you can't read something, you're not going to tell your classmates or your teacher. So at our schools, all the teachers, all the fellow students know what these children are going through. So they feel a lot more comfortable learning in our sort of classroom environment, Gareth.
Okay. So, Doc, what do you make of the matric exam stress? Is this something we should be paying extra careful attention to? Every year we get told we've got to tread on eggshells with matrics because matric is so hard. And, I remember it and I wasn't stressed at all, but I'm not the usual. How do you feel about this, Doc? Do you think that we built this up and we've actually created a mountain out of a molehill and we've made it so absolutely scary for kids that it's added to the anxiety? Or do you think it really is something that requires a huge amount of delicate, careful, and considered attention?
Right. So let me give a bit of context. In life, or whatever you value comes with stress. So value and stress are married. You can't divorce the two. So the more you value something, the more there is stress attached to it, because there's a consequence of it not working out. So I value my kids, it comes with stress. I value my marriage, it comes with stress. I value my work, it comes with stress. So when I see a matriculant comes into my office and says, I'm not stressed, that means, well, they don't value it. So even if you're well prepared, your body is naturally going to react with anxiety because you value it. So should it be stressful? Well, if you value matric and you value your marks and you value your future education, I mean, look, if you're looking to leaving matric and going and doing something else that's not related to the academic world, that's okay, then you wouldn't necessarily value it. But if you value that trajectory, then naturally it's going to come with stress. But there's a big difference between handling stress in effective ways and not handling stress and letting it absolutely control you. And the difference is, one is preparation. So once you're prepared for something, then anxiety doesn't overwhelm you. So I always tell people the following. My favorite term to use of all time is blueprints and frameworks. And the reason why I love blueprints and frameworks is because The moment your framework to managing a stress is more complicated than the stressor, then you'll never lose control. The moment the stressor is more complicated than your framework, well, now you're going to bleed anxiety and fall apart and burn out. So the analogy that I use, and I've used this a couple of times even on the show, is if I give you a Rubik's Cube and I say to you, you've got 10 minutes to do this in. Now let's create some consequences. Let's create, well, if you don't manage it in 10 minutes, I take away, I don't know, R1 million out of your account. How do you think you're going to feel 10 minutes later? Well, you're going to feel incredibly stressed, maybe helpless, hopeless, despondent, because you don't have the skill set. You don't know how to do it, versus me giving you the same Rubik's Cube, but this time I give you the blueprint, the method, the system, the step-by-step guide with the pictures. How do you feel 10 minutes later? Well, you feel in control because you have the method. People think resiliency is my internal ability to manage what's in front of me. Not true. Resiliency is, do I have the skill set, the method, the blueprint, the system to manage the stress that's in front of me? That's why you get people that have a massive Rubik's Cube in life in terms of exam in front of them and they feel in control. Somebody else has something quite simple in front of them and they're falling apart. So the first method, and there's no quick fix around this, if you value it, make sure that you have the skill set to master it. If you value it, make sure, and that's what the school system, Tyron will tell you, that's where the school system comes in, because it teaches the kids a method, a system in order to manage with the stress that's in front of them. So that's number one. Make sure that you have the method, make sure you've studied, make sure you're well prepared because nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. Sure. You can, if you're not prepared, anxiety is going to take over. Period. Right. Period, especially if you value it. And then the second thing that you want to look after is your body, your diet, your exercise, your sleep. And the third thing, and the final thing that I'll mention is, so again, once we've got to study, we've got to prepare. 2, you've got to look after your body. And 3, you've got to learn immediate relaxation techniques when you're actually in the exam. So how do you calm your body down? And I want to suggest one thing, and by the way, you can Google plenty. You can Google breathing technique, relaxation technique, progressive muscle relaxation techniques. You can Google a lot of things that will help you in the moment. But I want to suggest one that has lasted and it's really shown incredible effectiveness in the moment. So whether, by the way, you have exam stress, you have stage anxiety, when you want to calm yourself down, you do this. For any emotion to be created on planet Earth, your body temperature has to go up. There's no emotion on the planet that can be created without your body temperature going up. Your body temperature has to rise. So if we can control body temperature, we can ultimately control emotion. So in other words, if I take somebody and put them in an ice bucket or one of those walk-in freezers, within 2 minutes, emotions decrease. Within 2 minutes. You know, I have people sitting here having panic attacks. The moment I turn on the aircon, lower their body temperature, anxiety goes away. It's not possible for anxiety, for your body to react physiologically when your body temperature is low. So if we can decrease your physiological temperature, we will decrease emotion. So in the exam, never mind the breathing technique, which is all wonderful and great, but make sure your body temperature goes down. Get a glass of water or maybe a bottle of water, ice cold water, maybe wear maybe loose clothing or maybe clothing that are not so warm, but make sure your body temperature is low because you will decrease your anxiety.
I didn't know that. That's very, very handy stuff. So Tyron, what kinds of things do you guys do besides what Dr. Hanan's already addressed here?
So look, I agree with Dr. Hanan 100%. Look, what he said is definitely relevant. A well-prepared person or learner in this case is going to do much better at the exams. However, being on the front line, children nowadays, to actually get them to prepare, thoroughly and to prepare in time is actually quite a difficult feat. So we obviously preach to them all the time, guys, when are you going to start studying? Have you started? And, children nowadays, Dr. and Gareth, they're under so much anxiety and stress. I'll just give you some examples. The divorce rate nowadays is so much higher. Kids are having to deal with not only their own stress, but their parents' stress as well. The parents put a lot of their stress onto their children. They've got to grow up a lot faster, deal with that. Things like social media are making them feel like, they always have to be in a relationship. There always has to be someone in their lives. That causes them extra stress and anxiety. So these poor kids are under so much stress from other things. I'll give you another example. Cell phones, it's a big problem. We actually take the phones away from them at school. They film each other and they send out TikToks of each other. And now you've got a poor child who there's a TikTok out, of them out there somewhere that's causing them stress. So by the time they actually sit down and go, wow, I'm now starting to feel exam stress, all these other stresses have had such an impact on them that they're planning late. They're not starting to study in time. They're basically kind of waiting until the day before. So it's difficult to actually say, yes, you must prepare early. And we help them with study skills courses. We try do, timetables for them when they need to study. But it's very difficult for them to actually place that part of, of their lives as a study skill into everything that they're dealing with.
Let me ask you this: what can parents do to help, and what can the learners do for themselves besides what we've already covered with preparation?
Yes.
You mentioned phones. Can we, for example, like just discipline ourselves, and maybe the parents can help do this too? Whether you have less time with your phone while you're writing exams. You shouldn't be involved with the phone while you're so busy with this other stuff. Is that easier said than done?
100%. I would say that phones need to be actually taken away from the children. The problem is that, and I'm sure Dr. Anand can agree with me, I don't know if you've experienced it, but we're actually having children who are going through similar withdrawal symptoms to actual drug users when their phones are being taken away from them, because they're so used to having that piece of equipment with them. Taking it away actually causes a withdrawal, a physical withdrawal that we can even see at school. Sometimes we take their phones away and they just they battle to cope. Sometimes we get new students that are not used to us taking their phones away. It takes them 2 to 3 weeks to normalize. So definitely it must be taken away from them. Look, it's a good tool to use if you're doing geography and you want to Google something, geomorphology or something, but the children obviously abuse it. They don't use it for its intended purposes. They're basically on social media talking to their friends. So I think it is a good tool, but parents need to be more hands-on in terms of what they're allowing their children to use. But once again, I'm bringing it back to couples these days who a lot of them are divorced. A lot of moms and dads are both working full-time jobs. So who actually watches these children and monitors their actual, phone usage time? So it's a double-edged sword. It's very difficult. But I think we need to teach children rather to actually be disciplined and know when they need to use their phone for certain things. That's what we're trying to do at our schools, is teach them when and where and how to use their phone to help them study.
Yeah, Doc, I mean, this phone thing, the fact that Tyrone says it's almost like they go through withdrawal like a drug addict would. This is a big problem. That's what we've been warning about for you. What do we do?
You know what? The thing is that we have to accept that stress is not going anywhere. Life is becoming way more complicated. I remember when I was at school, when I finished matric, 97, I mean, if you got 2 distinctions, you were considered a freaking genius. These days, kids are getting 8, 9, 10 distinctions, and people are like, well, not even batting an eyelid. So the pressure is on, and the competition is on, people comparing themselves. So of course, there's an incredible amount of stress. But I'll mention, people talk about discipline. But discipline is predicated on a framework. And the more difficult something is, the more specific the framework has to be. And I'll give you a quick example. I know we're running out of time, but if I take somebody let's take gym as an example, doesn't know fitness, doesn't understand fitness, or let's take somebody that does. Let's take somebody that's known fitness their whole life. If I give them a very general framework, go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because gym is within their comfort zone, they will outdo you. They will go to gym Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But if I take somebody that's never been to the gym, doesn't know what gym looks like, not a health conscious kind of person, and I tell them to go to the gym with the same framework, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it will never happen. For them, I have to be much more specific with my framework. So for them, I have to say, Sunday, I'm coming to your house, we're packing a bag, we put in a car. Monday, I'm waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning, we're coming to your house, I'm fetching you, getting dressed, I'm taking you to a personal trainer, I paid 6 weeks in advance. You have to be that specific with somebody that doesn't lack the discipline. So discipline doesn't just happen. It's predicated on a particular and a specific framework. And the more difficult it is, the more specific the framework has to be.
Yes,
yeah. I love it. This is something we could carry on talking about and probably should, but we're out of time, as you've already pointed out, Doc. Leigh-Ann and Mash and I will no doubt have some things to say to this. Mash only wrote matric, like 2 years ago or whatever, right, Mash? You can speak with some authority on this. But Tyron, thank you for your time, and Dr.
Yes,
Hanan,
yes.
as always.
Yes,
Thank
my
you, guys.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks,
Keep well.
Nice to see you. There we go. Matric exam time.
Mhm.
It's
And then, add to that load shedding and water shortages. My word, it's complicated these days.
sure not as straightforward as everybody says it is.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be back in just a moment or two with more cliffcentral.com. And because it's Monday, we're going to have Markets Mondays today with markets.com. That is coming up in the next hour. Plenty of other good stuff to get to. Don't go anywhere. And if you are writing matric exams, or you have someone in the house who is writing matric exams, good luck. That's all we can say. And as Dr. Hanan says, use those frameworks. Make sure that you're prepared. It's the best way to make sure you go in with less stress. But I love that idea of just cooling your body down. Huh?
Yeah, often taking a glass of water and holding it to your wrists. That helps me a lot.
It really does help. Yeah. Whenever I'm warm, I'm just an anxious mess. But whenever I'm cold, I can do anything. I feel like I can just take on the world. It does help.
Basically, we all just have to learn to regulate our body temperature down, and then we won't be such emotional sacks of shit. So let's get our acts together. All right.
Hi, I'm Barrett Edelstein. Join me for my podcast, Celeb Savant. Today, I'm with Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
So right at the moment, I'm at home in London, but after I speak to you, I'm going to pack my bags.
3 of the members of UB40, Earl, Matt, and Jimmy.
Well, we're in the middle of a tour at the moment.
A career retrospective with actors, singers, and entertainment industry experts every Friday morning at 9 o'clock on cliffcentral.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
In the last few months on social media, there has been an increase of electric cars and government, those two search terms kind of being used by people, as a result of this new theory that governments are kind of colluding to get the petrol price and fuel prices around the world to increase to get more people buying electric vehicles. Why would the government want to do that? The theory there is that they want to be able to control when they turn on and off a car, for instance. So there's a criminal who's driving this car,
And they want to turn it off.
and it's turn it off to kind of get rid of them. Type vibe.
Why can't you do that in a
So that was one. You know,
No, I think it's a load
of
of bollocks, but a load of rubbish. And the reason I think that is because
you can do that in NASCAR, right?
you can do that in a nice car. You don't need an EV to do that.
Yeah.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Oh, can you imagine if the government had the power to turn off your electric car? I mean, how much corruption is involved in that? Imagine you like bribing some guy in an office who's sitting in front of a whole bunch of screens. Please, chief, don't switch off my car. Yeah, I'm going to send you some money. Huh?
Nkaluma Eskom. Hey, I'd bite Eskom. Yo.
Well, now let's see how they do. I mean, they've been given a massive loan, and some of it is a grant as well, to convert power stations from coal into other sources like wind and battery. and also develop the electric vehicle market in South Africa. So
I think you can't give government power to switch off people's cars. It just will go very, very badly very quickly.
Yeah.
It's going to, in this country, I mean, you can't even get them to do the basic stuff that we actually go and vote for them to do. So there's no way they'd be able to do this properly. But we won't get stuck in the reeds on a Monday morning. You want to add something, Mash, before we move on?
Yes. This takes me back to the whole thing that happened with Apple and the FBI a couple of years ago, where the FBI wanted access to a terrorist, a deceased terrorist's iPhone. And Apple was like, we do not have the technology to access anybody's iPhone, and we do not want to create that technology, because making that technology would actually open a whole new can of worms that we do not want anybody to have access to. So if government does this once, it opens a whole new can of worms for even criminals.
The reason that we even brought this up to start the second hour of the show this morning, and if you've just woken up and joined us, hello, good morning, is because Auto Trader, the Auto Trader podcast, brand new episode today, they were talking about this and why there's suddenly such an interest in electric cars and government, and that is why. So don't miss the latest edition of the Auto Trader podcast. But we were also talking just before the break about matric and matric exams, and we were talking about ways that people can cope with stress. And you know, Leigh-Ann was saying that if she just takes a glass of water and just holds it up to her wrists, that tends to help her a little bit with anxiety and that kind of thing. So now everybody's going to do that. But are there any other things? No, but listen, whatever works for you, right?
Yeah.
Any other things that you can think of that we all need to be paying attention to in order to help people who are writing matric exams at the moment? It is stressful, whether or not, you know, Dr. Renan said at the beginning of his discussion, he said, if you value something, there's going to be stress because the stress comes from the fact that you hope for a certain result. You're working towards a certain outcome, and therefore you're tied to that outcome. So you have to care about that outcome. And if you care about something, then you're going to get anxious if it doesn't go your way. It makes perfect sense. Maybe there are some people who just don't care about matric exams, and maybe that, you know, that's a problem that we need to discuss in another time. But there are obviously all these stresses of modern living that maybe we didn't have to put up with 10,
for sure,
20 years ago.
I just remember in my matric year, our principal greeted us in a line. She stood at the end of our line and said something personal to each of us before the exams. And when it got to me, she said, Leigh-Ann, we are really expecting big results from you. And that threw me completely. I did not perform as well in my matric exams as I had during the rest of the year because of that. That's no fault of her own. She was being encouraging. But to the point of the types of schools that have been set up now to help people with this performance anxiety and that sort of thing, there wasn't a support system for that before. And those schools will know that sometimes that sort of laying that expectation on someone can be more harmful than good.
Well, and one thing that's interesting because it's a personal story, and I don't, you know, some people would respond very well to that. They'd go, "Oh, well, that's encouragement," because now,
you know,
I like a bit of a responsibility. I like to shoulder a burden. I like being relied upon to deliver. But then there are other people who it can cripple them completely. They just they want to run the opposite direction. As soon as you expect things from them, they go, don't do it.
Malfunction.
How about you, Matt? You just wrote recently. I tease you, but you're the youngest of us three for sure. But you can probably speak with some authority on this, having done it not so long ago.
And one thing that really helped me in my matric year was just sleeping. Just sleep. Get as much sleep as possible. Because if you are actually straining yourself, and it doesn't apply to everyone, there are people out there who can wake up for 16 hours, study until 3 a.m., be up at 6 a.m. I don't know how they do that. I studied with such people. But for me personally, it was just getting the rest I needed. Because having the rest I needed meant that my brain can function at its most maximum capacity. And I was able to actually retain so much more information. So it starts off with taking care of yourself. That's most important in your matric year. Because so many people neglect their health, just pushing the books. And then when day of writing comes, they're just a mess. They can't even remember anything because they've just pushed themselves to the limit.
Well, here's something. Ancient ether has got a very specific technique, which is quite interesting. Close your right nostril, breathe through your left. Once you use the nasal cycle to decrease your body temperature. Use your new Apple Watch to check all your metrics. Okay,
so she's determining, she's referring to breathe in with your left nostril,
out with your
and
right.
breathe out with your left or your right, or alternate.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But yeah, literally swapping like that.
Well,
I have seen that.
I mean, I also think that you've got to have some perspective on this, because people do put huge amounts of pressure on matrics, and then they go off, they go and write their matric exams, they get their matric, or they don't at the end of it. But I can honestly tell you now, I do not remember a single thing that I wrote in matric. I don't remember one question. I don't remember one answer I gave. And so with the benefit of hindsight, and that's not because I have a terrible memory, which I may have, but like I can remember the lyrics to songs I haven't heard in 20 years. But I do not recall a single thing that I wrote in matric. And that is because it's really important while you're in it. But as soon as you finish with it, you forget about it completely.
Absolutely.
So you got to just have a little bit of perspective here too. So, it's not the end of the world. The worst can happen. Well, you fail and then you just do it again. Lots and lots of people have. Do you hear about these people who commit suicide? I heard, I think it was Dr. Phil was talking to Joe Rogan, and someone sent me a clip of that. And he was talking about just, how there are these kids who are under so much pressure from their friends and everything else. This girl was in like a hockey team, and she was a really good hockey player, and she was playing with all these other really, really brilliant athletes. And the one girl on the team said something to her, sent her a horrible text or whatever. He said like 5 days from joining this team, she decided to kill herself. And you think, and we talk about this, and we say, oh well, you've got to have some strength and resilience in you. But this is a new kind of pressure that I don't think we ever really had to deal with. People now, because of phones and everything else, the bullying follows you home. It never stops. It's relentless. It's so many more people because you're on the internet. There are things that we don't, as anybody who isn't currently, in their teens or in their early 20s, you don't understand what these people are going through. And we can say, oh, well, they've got a much easier life and their life is better. And, it's better to be, growing up now than it was in whatever the 90s, the 80s, whenever it was. But actually, there are different pressures now that apply in different ways. And they're just as devastating for those young people as, the kids who were on the milk cartons when we were at school. These kids who'd been...
There's also, it's kind of strange to think about, but the more access that we have now to things like Google, Wikipedia, it makes it a little bit more challenging to stick to the syllabus, if you know what I mean. So when we grew up without those things, we studied the syllabus and that was it. We didn't go beyond that. We might have had a parent who knew a bit more about solar power or whatever, who may have helped us, or history or maths. But as I remember, as soon as my dad introduced a different mathematical method to me than what we had been taught, that would throw me a little bit. And so now having all of this access to absolutely every bit of information you want can sometimes throw you off what the syllabus requires of you and the answers that they're looking for. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of try and strike a balance with that as well.
Togoza says, I remember being super confident in my exam room. I was so ready. The best thing to do for yourself is make sure that you're prepared. Well, that's also what Dr. Hanan said, and good. And Togoza. By the way, Ancient Ether says, I am a he. So those are the pronouns.
I'm a he. Sorry for misgendering you. And also, and he also says, no, you need to keep the one nostril closed at all times.
Oh.
So
all right,
maybe I was wrong on that too.
Yeah. Well, Ancient Ether's advice is quite useful. Assuming high school kids have Apple Watches. So,
well, that's another. Tracy says primary school suicide is happening more than we want to realize. Yeah, that's terrifying. You think of these primary school kids. Ay. That scares me.
Mm.
Good Lord. Exam tip from Carl. Keep raisins in your blazer pocket. Raisins are brain food and chewing stimulates your brain. I chewed them during exams and matric. Useful. Huh?
Are you allowed to eat during exams?
Well, I suppose if you have some raisins in your pocket, what are they going to do? Like chase you out of the exam?
Yeah, no, they can't.
That's not a bad thing.
Hmm.
I know. I
It's not
think
a
you're
bad
allowed
idea.
to do that, aren't you? Surely you can't have your phone with you, obviously, right?
Yeah, you can't.
Did you ever cheat, Leigh-Ann? Did you ever write down formulas on the inside of something and then hide them or whatever?
Yes, I did.
Good, because I
Wait,
did
what?
too.
But I wasn't a serial cheater.
Okay,
I reckoned I only used it once or twice in a pinch.
okay, but
And you know what else it is sometimes it's that, when you're doing a crossword and the answers are in the back of the book,
Yes,
it's so hard not to look. And
Mhm.
that's that's human nature.
sure.
And when we used to do those tests where you put your suitcase up in between the two of you, I found it very difficult not to rock back and look at the other person's page. Not because I was trying to be devious, but there's some kind of weird drive within you to see what other people have written. I don't know. There
remember-
must be,
I
Dr.
remember I
Hanan
wrote-
could explain.
I wrote a bunch of scientific formulas. There were 4 of those motion equations that were to do with speed and time and distance.
Mm.
And there were 4 of them, and I wrote them all down inside like my, I don't know, a pencil case or something. But luckily no one saw, and I didn't get chased out of the exam. But that was the most cheating I ever did. And I
Yeah.
still
Wow.
can't remember those formulas. I mean, like who would remember any of those? Unless
Sure.
you're studying, Nah.
The worst form of cheating I've ever committed was one of our exams. Actually, they didn't detach the answer sheet, so the exams would actually arrive to the school with the answer sheets attached, stapled to them. They had to
wow.
detach them before they handed them to us. And I don't know how they missed this, but they weren't detached. This was for an Afrikaans exam, and everyone passed it with flying colors. And
That's
but
great.
what actually got us caught, because we were all like signaling to each other in the exam room that detach the answer sheet, detach the answer sheet. So after we're all done, we detached the answer sheet, crumpled them all up, put them in our pockets, handed out papers, and then left.
Mhm.
But we were all caught out because some dum-dums in the grade, some answers actually had multiple possible answers. So
Mhm.
people actually wrote like 3 different answers
Oh,
with
no.
slashes. And I was like, you dum-dums, you're only supposed to pick one. That's how we all got caught out. And everyone got like 95% for that. I was like, get some things wrong, y'all.
Yeah,
So,
you be good at cheating. You can't be like shitty at it. Otherwise, you make it worse for everybody.
exactly.
It's
So that's
so
why we got
irritating.
caught out.
All right. Well, let's talk about a couple other things that are in the news today and that you wanted to bring up. So we talk about this, the way kids are dealing with matric exams and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
What is this quiet hour thing that's going on, Leigh-Ann? Apparently a low sensory, everything's high sensory, everything's about, smell, touch, taste, see, hear. What is this new low sensory shopping experience that everyone's talking about?
So it's actually a Cotton On Kids. We've got Cotton On, the brand that we know,
right.
and this is the Cotton On Kids store, big in South Africa. They've introduced something called Quiet Hour into their stores. I mean, if you've ever been in a store, sometimes the music is blaring, the TVs are on, there's a lot of stimulation going on, lots of people, and in a kids store, especially, the screaming, the crying, it's just a bit much, especially for kids who have like sensory sensitivities.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being a mom of a child who doesn't respond well to these really noisy environments, and having to put them either on a plane or to take them clothes shopping in a store? So yeah, they're being quite woke about it, if you'll excuse that. And they've launched just an hour. In fact, it's only once a week on Thursdays from 3:30 to 4:30. And this is all through October to December during the busy times. And then thereafter, it'll be once a month only. So the music and TVs will be turned off. There'll be a pause on all of the noisy sort of stock work and bringing out of boxes and metal hangers.
So is this especially because of kids who are oversensitive to this stuff? Is that why they're doing it, or is it something they want to expand into? Just give everybody a little bit less like of a stressful. Because God knows, with all the music and the lights and everything, shopping malls can probably, even for people who are not, extremely
neurodivergent. Yeah, I mean, I am neurodivergent, but still, I know a lot of people who would prefer to shop in an environment like that, even if they aren't highly sensitive to it. And certainly, this is not only for the children, but for the parents as well. And as a parent, I would much rather take my child into that kind of situation if I could, So, yeah, I mean, it might be, a lot of people might turn their noses up at it and say that's really a bit much, but it's once a week or once a month for an hour. That there's just a little bit of quiet time. I'm sure the staff appreciate it too, especially in a kid's store.
Yeah.
Yeah, different strokes. Yeah, different strokes, Leigh-Ann. I mean, I actually do prefer the busyness and the rowdiness of any shopping mall. I prefer actually having seeing people going to the changing rooms, people fighting for an outfit, like the last size 32. I like that. I like that that energy that you get from a shopping mall. Just when you're shopping for clothes and there's the music playing, sometimes your favorite song comes on and you're like, oh, let me just shake my ass a little bit in these jeans. So I just love that energy of the shopping mall. And I know it's not for everyone. Some people do need that that sensory experience and just the peace and quiet of it all. But yeah, I mean, to each their own. And I know that there's kids out there who are hypersensitive to all of this. And for them, I think this is awesome. Awesome stuff for them.
Well, Linda says you just buy your kids a 20 Rand pair of earmuffs from a hardware store, and that'll cancel out some of the noise. It works like magic. So
good thinking.
Good point. You can always find a way, right? Tracy says should be good for the workers there as well. Imagine working in that
flip. It's like working in a nursery school.
So Angelina and Carl are just asking Leigh-Ann, neurodivergence sounds like a superpower, but Carl says Leigh-Ann does love a good old ailment. Hey, how do you know you're neurodivergent?
I've been diagnosed. I have ADHD.
Do you think
I'm on medication?
Do you think
yes, I have always had it. It just only became more and more noticeable to me in recent years. But I was diagnosed
How does it manifest?
6 years ago.
What are the things that happen?
It happened. So for me, what exacerbated it was the stress of my mom's stroke when she was in hospital for a year. And, we came close to losing her at that stage. And I was generally battling to find the motivation to work. I was battling to keep to a routine, to a schedule. And we realized and understand that this psychiatrist has treated me for 20 years now for other issues. Right. So she was the one who picked up and said, I think what's been happening is that you do have ADHD, but this trauma and previous traumas have brought it to light and exacerbated the symptoms.
Well, I mean, listen, that's unfortunate, but at least you're dealing with it, right? You can't ignore these things. And obviously these days, I often think that if we'd had the attention paid to mental health issues that they're paying attention to them now with, when we were kids, we may have ended up with many more diagnoses,
we may have ended up with better performing children.
We might have.
More distinctions and more very successful people in varsity and professors.
Yeah, absolutely. And people might have been taught to deal with things a whole lot better. And maybe we wouldn't have, because obviously, if you think about it, there are things that our generation has not dealt with particularly well that now become the problem for the next generation. Just as the ones before. Yeah. And I think there's also a little bit of like PTSD from these people who, and I'm not talking about the school or matric exams or anything, because if you get PTSD from that, then you really do need to be on some serious medication. I mean, you're going to have harder challenges in your life than matric exams, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
there are things that, we kind of brush off as being not particularly important, but our lives probably would have been a bit better if we hadn't done things a certain way when we were at school. I don't know. I don't feel like my life was either too cushy or too rough. I think like somewhere in between. But I can only say it for myself, because I don't know what it's like to grow up now, and I don't know what it was like to grow up, 50 years before that. So you get your basket of goodies.
I mean, we have to remember that you and I were children of the 80s and 90s, and I was having a family discussion the other evening. We were remembering how ill my brother was. He got tonsillitis, I think 11 times in 1 year. So basically every month of the year he was ill. And the worst is you can't remove them if the person is infected. So so this poor kid was just like permanently vomiting and feverish. And he said to us, why was I not put in hospital? Because it was one particularly bad stint where he hadn't eaten anything for like weeks. And we said, because it was the 80s, you didn't do that then. You got Kevin Panado and sent home.
Right. Well, Mapelo wants to, just on the issue of matric exams, just bring me up to speed. Apparently these days the learners have a formula sheet with all the formulas required attached to the question paper for physics and maths. Okay.
Yes, we did have it.
We had to learn them, and then, so if now you get a sheet, then technically I didn't cheat, if they've changed the rules now. Technically,
technically, yeah.
I'm gonna give myself that one. Khomotso says, I wish that restaurants would stop blaring music. At some restaurants, you can't even have a decent conversation. Well,
yes,
that's a whole separate issue, but it's something worth discussing. Have you noticed some of these restaurants too? They've now, it's become very cool and trendy to do what I think it must have started in Europe, where you have like DJs or whoever while you're busy eating. That's all good and well. There are a lot of places that are doing this now, but it does make it very loud and very difficult to hear anything. And maybe it's just because we're old and we moan, but you just said yes, Mash, so you obviously agree.
Yes, you guys are not old and moaning. This is an issue that everybody has. And you can't have a freaking conversation at some of these restaurants. I was actually at one of them this past weekend with 6 hours of no electricity. I had to eat out. But you can't hear the people you're talking to, and you can't even ask them to turn the volume down, because I did ask our waitress, and she was like, okay, I'll go talk to them. Talk to them about what? Because nothing happened. Nothing happened. And you can't even hear the person you're talking to. You think to yourself, is this a club or a restaurant? Am I here to eat and talk, or to shake my ass and get down?
Right. Yeah. There are a lot of these places become very trendy for them to do this now. They want loud playing, and not necessary.
Or live performances. And then, this person's all up in our food, shaking their hips. And I'm like,
Well, I've got a birthday on Saturday. And the other thing that kind of irritates me is if you go to some restaurants and there are, everybody does their thing for people's birthdays. Some of them make a cake or whatever. But you could have up to 3 or 4 birthdays in a venue. And then it's basically like people singing happy birthday every 5 minutes. It's just as loud. And you're just in the middle of a conversation at a table where there isn't a birthday, but you now have to be roped into all of this because, someone at table number 14 is celebrating.
Yes.
Well, these are the prices that we have to pay when we don't have the money for the real price of a private chef or a big entertainment space at home.
Private chef.
Where you can control everything, your music, your air conditioning.
Right, exactly. Bring your body temperature down and you won't get so stressed. Isn't that right? Okay, so quickly, because Mash is also going to squeeze this in for us before we get to Markets Mondays. So Mash, the different styles of love. Okay, I love when we talk about this stuff, because I don't know who writes these things. Some journo at some like BuzzFeed or whatever comes up with a list, and there's a new list of these things every day, but some of them are fun, and people like to play the game where they, okay, well, which love style do I fall under? So give us the 5 love styles and tell us about these different details and formulae for each of these.
So I got this from it's not some crappy magazine this time around. I actually got it from Psych to Go. It's a YouTube channel I'm really into. It's all about mental health.
Okay.
And this actually also connects back to the conversation we had a bit earlier about growing up in the 80s versus growing up now, with all the stimulants that actually face people, young people, especially going to the matric. So
look at
although
this.
we have
Everything is linked today. This is pretty wild. Good.
Yes. So although we have a choice in becoming the people we strive to be, it is without a doubt that our childhoods shape us to a certain extent. How we choose to react or in different situations and the way we express ourselves are behavioral patterns that are formed starting at a young age. And when we first begin to learn how to make these immediate decisions, it all comes from our immediate environment. Marriage and family counselors Dr. Milan and Kay Yokovich discovered that everyone has a certain love style based on their upbringing. And these are the 5 love styles.
All right,
First of all, we have the pleaser. The pleaser often grows up in a home with overly protective or angry, critical parents. As children, pleasers do everything they can to be good and to be on their best behavior, so as to not to provoke or get a negative response from their parent. Pleaser children don't receive any comfort. Instead, they spend their time and energy giving comfort to their reactive parent. Pleasers are uncomfortable with conflict and deal with disagreements by often just giving in or making up for them quickly. They usually have a hard time saying no, and because they want to minimalize conflict, they may not be truthful and lie to avoid difficult confrontations.
Leigh-Ann, you've often said you're a pleaser and you hate conflict. So is this you? Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Absolutely, but it's becoming less and less as I get older and don't really give as much of a shit.
That's good. But however, when pleasers do feel stressed or believe that they are continuously letting someone down, they can have a breakdown and flee from relationships. Pleasers often spread themselves thin, trying to be everything to everyone when it's not realistic. And instead of forming healthy boundaries for themselves, they focus more on the needs and desires of others. In order for pleasers to cultivate stable relationships, they have to be honest about their own feelings rather than trying to do what is expected of them. Up next, we have the victim.
I'm not a pleaser.
So
the victim?
You're not a pleaser. Yeah, you're definitely not a pleaser. So the victim often grows up in a chaotic home. Victims learn to be compliant in order to survive by putting less attention on themselves so that they can stay under the radar to deal with their angry, violent parents. Victim children learn at a very young age to hide and stay quiet. Because being fully present is painful to them, victim children often build an imaginary world in their heads to cope with dangers they face on a daily basis. Victims have low self-esteem and usually struggle with anxiety and depression. They may end up marrying controllers who mirror the same behaviors as their parents. Victims learn to cope by being adaptable and going with the flow. Because of all the chaos they are used to, victims get uncomfortable in calm situations. They often are always anticipating the next blow up, and this leads them to self-sabotage quite often. So you're not a victim, Gareth, are you?
No, he's definitely not.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a victim either.
That leaves me with 3. I've got 3 to choose from.
Yes.
So
let's hope there's one in there for you.
They did. I think it's the next one. So
all right, let's.
I am definitely the next one. So the next one is the controller. The controller usually grows up in a home where there wasn't a lot of protection, so they learn to toughen up and take care of themselves. They need to feel in control at all times to prevent vulnerability they experienced in their childhood from being exposed in their adulthood. People with this lifestyle believe that they're in control when they can avoid experiencing negative feelings of fear, humiliation, and helplessness. Controllers, however, don't associate anger as vulnerability. So they use it as a weapon to remain in power. controllers have rigid tendencies, but may also be sporadic and unpredictable. They don't like stepping out of their comfort zones because it makes them feel weak and unprotected. They prefer to solve problems on their own and like getting things done in a certain manner. Otherwise, they get angry. People with this lifestyle need to learn to let go. That is me. Is that you, Gareth?
Maybe. But we still got two more, so I'm not going to commit fully to this one yet. We got so far we know. All right, so we've got the victim. We've got the what was the other one? Pleaser.
We have the victim, the pleaser, and the controller. And then the fourth one is the avoider. The avoider often grows up in a less affectionate home that values independence and self-reliance. As children, avoiders learn to take care of themselves starting at a very young age and put their feelings and needs on hold to deal with their anxieties of being the anxieties of having little to no comfort from their parents. Avoiders tend to like their space and rely on logic and detachment more than their emotions. They get uncomfortable when people around them experience intense mood swings. In order for avoiders to cultivate healthy, long-lasting relationships, they need to learn how to open up and express their emotions honestly.
Okay.
So, yep. And then the last one is the vacillator. The vacillator often grows up. The vacillator often grows up with an unpredictable parent. Vacillators learned that their needs aren't their parents' top priority. Without consistent affection from their parents, vacillators develop a deep fear of abandonment. But when the parent finally feels like giving them the time and attention, vacillators are usually too angry and tired to receive it. As vacillators enter adulthood, they try to find the consistent love they were deprived of as children. Vacillators have a tendency to idealize new relationships, but once they feel let down or disappointed, they grow dejected and doubtful. They often feel misunderstood and experience a lot of internal conflict, emotional stress. Yes?
I think you wrote this article. I don't think it's written by you. You wrote this, right?
No, I didn't write this. So in order for vacillators to cultivate healthy, stable relationships, they need to learn how to pace themselves and get to know someone before committing too soon and getting hurt by their own expectations. So I hope you guys learned something about yourselves, and we still need to find out which one Gareth is here.
I don't know, but Ancient Ether says I might be a controller, and Dogoza says, okay, I'm the controller. Sounds like a horrible person.
They all sound horrible or weak or pathetic.
Right.
But
Sanella says, where is the whore in all these options? Needs to be a whore.
If you're a vacillator, you may have tendencies to
yes, the
vacillator is a whore 1 week.
Yeah, vacillators are most likely to be whores. So each one does have their positives. They're not all just negative. I mean, the victims tend to actually be very affectionate. But of course, because of their chaotic background, they do self-sabotage a lot. So each one has some positive aspects to them. Some have some more negative than positive, like the controller. But when things are good, they're great. When things are bad, they're bad. So there is no in between. There's some positives with each. So I'm the controller. Leigh-Ann, you said you're the victim.
No, I'm a combination of 1 and 2.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I would say, Gareth, you're a combination between 3 and 4.
That is what? The controller and the avoider.
And the vacillator. Oh yes, the avoider and the avoider and the vacillator.
How about the person who does not give a fuck about what that's probably
the avoider.
You think I'm avoiding?
The avoider.
I
just think this is the kind of navel gazing that it's become very popular in all of these like pseudo psychology, articles and memes that are floating around on the internet. I just think it's probably not that exciting, and everybody thinks they have some love language, love style, but you might actually just be really shitty at love. Maybe that's also true for some.
You could just be a whore.
But you could also just be a whore. Yeah, you could be. Some people are really good at love. Some people are really bad at it. Some people are working on it all the time. Some people have a long way to go. I got the funniest voice note yesterday. You know, sometimes people leave voice notes on the studio line, and Ryan sent me one from somebody who is in love with me, and she basically poured her heart out, and she wrote me a poem. Now, yes, I'm not going to embarrass her because even though, I mean, there's, you know, it's really funny and actually kind of silly, but I'm not going to embarrass her by playing it because someone might recognize her voice and then she gets teased or whatever at work, and that's not fair. But she wrote this poem, which is awful, and also she, you know, this is the difference between people. It's like some people would respond very well to a poem; it might get them more interested. But when I hear the word poem, it disengages me even more. Like if you tell me,
yes, you know what? It's awkward because
I've written you a poem. Oh, it's the worst.
When somebody writes you a song or writes you a poem, it's always awkward, unless they are world award-winning poets or musicians. Then that's okay. But the rest of the time, it's awkward.
Stay away from poetry. It's not, you know, it really isn't. It's just the worst thing. When someone says, "I want to show you my poem. Can I share my poem
Very
with
creepy.
you?" That is exactly the opposite of what.
Unless you're like Lord Byron or I don't know, some
or like
hot singer.
Beyonce or Lady Gaga or something. I've talked to someone who used to like sending me voice notes singing. Oh, those are so cringe. And I'll be like, wow, beautiful, baby. Oh, so beautiful. But I'm so grossed out. I'm like, oh, Jesus. I was listening to another damn 2-minute voice note of this person just, the horrible singing.
No, it's gross.
So
it is. And you know what? Yeah, some people are too sure of themselves, and some people have no confidence at all in love. So you find your own lane and you stick to it. And you know what? You might just be, like we've said a few times now, you might just be a whore. So you could also deal with that.
And avoid that.
All right. From the ridiculous to the sublime. And this is our chance now to catch up on a Monday morning with what's going on in the markets. And just in case you don't already know what we do every couple of Mondays, is we have a feature effectively where we talk about what's going on in the markets. And we'll be having an in-depth discussion today around the state of the global environment, economic trends, what is moving the markets, all the really, really useful information. And we've got someone here who knows all of that stuff. So we've got some very particular things we want to address with Neil Wilson, who we'll be talking to in a moment. He's a chief market analyst at markets.com and at Finalto, and he will provide us with some expert analysis of market movements and the macroeconomic trends. Very, very important stuff. We're going to get to that in a second. But whether you're a new trader who's looking for a safe place to start, or you're an experienced trader who's looking for low spreads, multi-assets, and high tech, you will find markets.com suits you perfectly. A special offer to everybody who is listening now. If you haven't already tried this, you can follow the links on cliffcentral.com to register with markets.com. Just go to the website and you can find all the links there. You will get a 30% bonus on your deposit. Now, that is really big. That's a big deal. That's an extra injection of cash that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And if you refer a friend, you will both get a 30% bonus. So make sure you click the link on Markets Mondays on cliffcentral.com for more information. Get in there ASAP. You refer a friend, you will both get a 30% bonus. That sounds like a good reason to get involved, if you ask me. So let's welcome Neil Wilson and bring him on. Hey, Neil, how are you?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah. How is everyone over there?
Yeah, great to see you again. Neil, I gave a little bit of an introduction where I said that we would be looking today at the state of the global environment. Obviously, it's election week in the United States, and we know that politics tends to cause some upstream effects, which downstream make the economy behave a little more erratically at times like these. But what are we looking at? And in particular, let's begin by talking about the Fed. What has happened with the fallout from the Fed's decision on interest rates just last week?
Yeah, so I mean, it was quite a big week for the market with the Fed raising interest rates again by 0.75%. So another jumbo-sized rate hike. That's the fourth in a row. Really sort of hammering home the fact that they're trying to get on top of the inflation dragon, if you like, and they're trying to get control of it, but struggling still. The Fed raised rates. The fallout initially, we sort of saw the market kind of not quite sure whether it was hawkish, i.e., pushing for tighter financial conditions and more tight than the market thought anyway, or dovish, which is looser financial conditions. And then you had this press conference with the President Jay Powell, and then it kind of all fell out. And there was quite a lot of volatility last week. I think that was really the key thing. And so we saw stocks really taking a hit from that Fed meeting. But then into the end of the week, we had the monthly US labour market report, the non-farm payrolls report. That's always closely watched for being a leading indicator of what the Fed might do next. And we saw unemployment tick up in the US, and so that was just seen by the market maybe as a bit more positive, although it's higher unemployment should be positive, but it's all this sort of funny dynamic whereby if there's bad economic data, then you think, well, the Fed's not going to do so much, therefore that's actually quite good for stock markets. So we saw a lot of push and pull on that front, and I think the market's still trying to make up its mind about how far the Federal Reserve needs to go in raising interest rates. And then that has global ramifications, because really where the Fed goes, the rest of the world is kind of following. And the key thing really from last week was just that level of volatility that still exists, because we don't know where interest rates are going to end up in the
All right, well, you mentioned the downstream effects of this on the world economy and on markets like South Africa. So is there any impact on this on the South African markets as a result of this Fed decision?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you just look at the sort of the price action, just what was going on in the South African market, certainly, if you look at it in the wake of the meeting and in the wake of the non-farms as well, you saw a lot of movement. You saw the Rand rallying on Friday. You saw the SA 40 index, the leading 40 companies that rallied well. So in relation to the non-farms as well as the Fed, the two are all sort of interconnected. Just giving a sort of macro kind of picture, and you saw that South African index rally. But with South Africa, I think it's worth noting, there's the Fed certainly is driving a lot of this because of the global ramifications from interest rates and the dollar. The strong dollar is a key thing here, but also I think this sort of chatter, rumors around China reopening and easing the pressure on global supply chains, that is driving a lot as well, particularly in some of the basic resources stocks and the miners, and that's obviously quite a key component of the South African index. So there's a couple of big global macro trends that are buffeting the South African financial markets right now. I think we've got a webinar actually coming up this week with Simon Brown, so that he's going to be discussing a bit more about that in depth later this week. So there's a lot happening out there.
That is useful to know, and we're also familiar with Simon, so we'll be telling people about that presentation of his as well. Once we have some more info on it. I wanted to ask you though, with the Fed and interest rates, I mean, a lot of people complaining it's not enough and that they need to raise them significantly and over a prolonged period. What is your feeling on this? Do you think that the Fed has more plans to keep raising interest rates, and at what level will interest rates be able to bring inflation under control?
Yeah, so the market right now is kind of thinking around that sort of 5% level. We're at 4% now with the Fed funds rate. The market thinks maybe 5%. What the Fed did last week was say we think it's going to be a bit higher than we previously thought, so it's moved up to above 5% in terms of that pricing, that market futures pricing. The problem is that once inflation gets above 5%, that it's never been brought down to target, so back down to 2% level inflation, more kind of comfortable level of inflation, without the interest rate going above the inflation rate. So it currently sits around sort of 8%. There's different measures, but say it's around 8%. So you think maybe that the Fed has, although the Fed thinks it's going to move, the Fed sort of thinks, well, we're going to move up to 5 and a bit, and then stop, and that will bring it down eventually over time. The problem is that maybe it just needs to keep going, and that's maybe what the market's missing out on right now.
Well, I mean, didn't that happen with Paul Volcker back in the 80s as well? He kept raising and raising and raising the interest rates, and people thought, oh, this is going to devastate the economy. But it did eventually bring inflation under control. And it did launch a very good, bullish season for the US for some 10, 12 years after that. Once everything had been rationalized. Because all the market's trying to do, and correct me where I'm wrong here, Neil, because you're the expert, is find some kind of equilibrium, some sort of balance. And it's all supply and demand, and there's a lot of money that's been injected into the markets at the moment, which is what's causing the inflation. And what's going to happen with interest is that obviously the money will find the place where it's most desired, and hopefully this will be controlled by things like the interest rates at the Fed.
Yeah, I mean that's it, exactly. It's a very good way of describing it, and I think that the key uncertainty, the key unknown right now is when does inflation, at what level does inflation come down? And I think the problem for the market and the problem for the Fed and everyone is that once inflation becomes unleashed, it's really, really difficult to bring it back down.
Right.
And that the analogy is the toothpaste analogy. You can squeeze it out, but it's very difficult to shove it back in. But it's that's uncertain. So the uncertain thing for the market right now is that the ultimate level of interest rates. So the terminal rate, it's called. So where the Fed and other central banks eventually top out. I think that's the big unknown, and that's really why stock markets are still very volatile. There's still we're still in this bear market, although we're seeing these bear market rallies where we get a push up on sort of hope that things have maybe stabilized. But until the Fed actually stops, that's really the point at which we can get some more certainty, and therefore investors can feel confident again to start putting their money to work.
All right. Last bit of information with regard to the politicians is obviously we mentioned the midterm elections, which are happening this week, Tuesday, tomorrow. So is there anything there that we need to look out for? How will the markets respond if A, it goes very heavily towards the Republicans, as the polls are telling us it will, or B, if in fact the polls are wrong and it ends up putting a whole lot of Democrats back into office, both in gubernatorial elections, in the Senate elections, and then for members of the House of Representatives? How will that affect the economy and the markets in general?
Yeah, so I think Democrat clean sweep, it's quite low tail risk, if you like, if you call it that. The chances of that happening are quite small. I think that the Republicans seem to be set to take the House of Representatives. That looks pretty sure. Less clear in the Senate exactly what happens, but I think if you get that Democrat clean sweep, low chances of it happening. If it does happen, then Biden can push on with some of his agenda more easily, a lot more easily, and that could. We think that might be inflationary, so that might add to more stimulus, more fiscal support, and that could actually worsen inflation, which pushes the Fed to do more, and therefore probably bad for the market. Republicans' clean sweep would be probably net positive for the market, just because some of that agenda that Joe Biden wants to push through is less likely to be delivered. The chances are probably that the market rallies anyway after the election over the next few months. We've had quite a significant drawdown over the last this year, and traditionally, usually since the war, I think 17 out of 19 midterm elections, you've actually seen the market do a lot better in the 6 months after the elections than in the 6 months before. So once you remove the uncertainty of the election and you get the clarity about what the situation is in Washington, investors start to tend, historically, to pile back in. So you think that unless the Democrats can surprise with by taking both houses, then I think probably that's what happens.
All right. One last thing then. We've paid attention to the US, but the UK, I mean, with all their political shenanigans in the last while, has hardly been a picture of stability themselves. Let's just look at the Bank of England, because they've also hiked their rates. Is the turbulence in the UK over?
Yeah, well, we'd like to think so, but you never know. There does seem a lot more political stability with the new prime minister and chancellor, and we get a bit more on that on November the 17th with the autumn statement, the budget. So that's going to mean more pain, I think, for consumers, and ultimately the financial markets are not. They're not worried too much about what consumer pain there is. Unfortunately, they work on other things, and think that the volatility in the UK is now predominantly just a global phenomenon. I don't think, after the mini budget back in September and all that stramash about that, there was a real UK premium, a sort of political risk premium, or what one analyst called the moron risk premium, that was added to the cost of UK debt. It was an extra cost to our debt because they just weren't sure what we were going to do, because the political situation and the fiscal policy seemed all over the place. That's sort of worked itself out, and I think we're back to square one with that. But the global situation is still quite uncertain. I think, and the UK is quite an open global economy in that sense, and our markets are very diverse, and so we're very much at the mercy of what's going on globally. But I think internally, at least domestically, I think things have settled down somewhat.
I hope, from your mouth to God's ears, and I hope we have a very good week, and there are some nice takeaways from all these new developments. Obviously, the elections, the UK system settling down. Are there any other things on the horizon that we need to be on the lookout for at the moment? I mean, there's always some geopolitical threat. What are you looking at?
Well, I think one of there's probably, as I said before, whether China reopens, that's a big one, because that's going to play into what the third term of Xi Jinping actually means. Is he seeking to create a new direction? Obviously, the Taiwan situation is something that that could happen at any point, and I think that's probably the biggest sort of black swan. Or it's not really a black swan, because we kind of know it might happen, but if it did happen, it would still be like a thunderbolt and be hugely disruptive to the market.
Sure.
But also, I think, just looking to see what happens with Italy and the new prime minister. She's just finding her feet and kind of building that government, and just looking to see what sort of friction there might be between Italy and Brussels, and that could potentially lead to some volatility and maybe some widening of bond spreads in Europe, and that could create some volatility for the euro as well. So there's a few things, and there's always going to be something out there. So we're just sort of keeping our eyes open.
All right, Neil, thank you so much. Neil Wilson from markets.com and Finalto. He is the chief market analyst for them, and we have the benefit of his wisdom this morning and his experience too in the market. So thank you, Neil. Have a great week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye. So Neil Wilson and markets.com. And just in case you haven't already started, you need to get into Markets Mondays, brought to you by markets.com. They'll be back again in a few weeks' time. Remember to follow the link on cliffcentral.com to register with them. You'll get a 30% bonus, and you can get that on top of your deposit. If you also refer a friend, you will both get a 30% bonus. Make sure that you click on the links on Markets Mondays on cliffcentral.com so you can get all of the benefits of that. Mash and Leigh-Ann, have a happy Monday.
Thanks, you
Have
too.
a good one, guys.
Enjoy your week.
Cool,
Enjoy the
everybody.
week.
We'll see you tomorrow.